Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So it's Saturday, the 2nd of January, 2021. Feels weird to say that, doesn't it? It really does. So I want to just summarise as briefly as possible what's happening at the moment. As you all know, I was arrested on Tuesday. I think it was Tuesday, the 28th of December. And I was arrested on suspicion of a public order offence for filming in a hospital in Gloucester Royal Hospital. As you know, you can see the footage. My husband managed to switch his camera on as I was arrested in my own home. It was a day where we had a late night. I was in bed rather late in the day. I wasn't dressed. There was a knock at the door without a warrant, without presentation of a warrant at the least. As two male officers barged into my home and demanded to speak to me. And they demanded that I get out of bed. So when I got out of bed and got my dressing gown on, and as I made my way down the stairs, the younger male officer, they were two very young male officers, moved towards me, said I was under arrest, and slapped handcuffs on me by twisting my hands behind my back. It was at this point that we demanded that I was be allowed to get dressed, because I wasn't dressed, and it was obviously freezing cold. It was getting dark because it was later in the day. And that was the altercation that you could see on the stairs when I asked my husband to film, was asking to get dressed. So bear in mind, this is Christmas, this is in a family home, and my son was witness to all this. And what I want to say, actually, because this makes me really angry, is that the police completely jeopardised my son's welfare that day, because when that happened, he was absolutely terrified that that was happening in his home to his mother. So they arrested me on suspicion of public order offence. They took me to Gloucestershire Constabulary custody suite. I just want to talk as briefly as possible about what happened, because there was some serious breaches of procedure and protocol during my detention. So I was held at Gloucestershire Constabulary office, custody suite, for an hour. I was held in the holding bay. It's like a holding bay you go into before you go into the custody suite. They held me in there for an hour with handcuffs on behind my back before I was read the charge. And that is a breach of procedure. You're not supposed to be held that long with handcuffs. And when the handcuffs finally came off, after much protest from myself that they were hurting, my hands had swollen up really badly, and I showed them, and they ignored me. I said I need medical attention. Was read out the charge, and I was charged with this public order offence for filming in a hospital and upsetting people. Words to that effect. And at that point, after I'd refused to give medical information, because I refused to sort of answer any questions, I said that I didn't understand. Now, that was taken to mean I didn't, that was taken to be used to suggest I was mentally ill. Now, at that point, because I had just said that I didn't understand the legal charge against me, there was clearly a preemptive decision that had been made before my detention to try and pin mental health issues onto me, that I was mentally ill. And at that point, I was informed that I would need a responsible adult to come into the custody process with me. And they tried to get my husband to do it. But because my husband had my son, they couldn't arrange that. And luckily that didn't happen. And what they did was they brought in a woman from a charity called, I think it was CGP. Please check out that charity, because what they participated in that day was absolutely disgusting, to bring in a responsible adult for someone that was not mentally ill. Completely disgusting. So check out those guys. So this woman was brought in. And then I was put back in the cells. I was put back in the cells for, I don't know, a few hours, where I had to keep protesting, ringing the bell to see the custody nurse. Finally got to see the custody nurse, and I was told, and this is something worth noting, all the people in the movement that have had these awful handcuffs on, we've seen all the damage from other people, we've seen the marks, we've seen, you know, the implications of, is that these handcuffs are new, and what they are designed to do, listen to this, what they're designed to do is dig into your nerves. They hang from the sides of your wrists and they dig into your nerves. And because I've got small hands, for me in particular, it was very painful, because they were literally hanging off the sides of my wrists. So finally got to see the nurse, who was he was probably the only one in there that showed me any humanity, which was lovely. And then I was slammed back in the cells. About an hour later, I was told I had to go through an interview. At this point, I was unable to get any legal representation. The police make the phone calls on your behalf. You're not allowed to do any phone calls, which, again, that needs to be questioned, because I understood you were allowed to make phone calls. And the lawyers that I suggested were inappropriate, because these were protest lawyers and I needed a criminal lawyer. So I refused the duty solicitor because I felt that that would be inappropriate. I needed proper representation, and it's well known that duty solicitors work with the police. They're not impartial. And they still insisted on me going through a police interview. Before the police interview, I was told that I had to give a DNA sample. I obviously refused, and I was told if I don't give the sample, I would be held down and forced to do it. So just think about that for a moment. A woman with no criminal record, who is no threat to the public. I'm not a terrorist. I'm not a serious criminal. I haven't done anything to justify that kind of treatment. So think about, why did they do that to me? A woman that's just filming an empty hospital, filming the truth, filming what's in front of her, to be held down and forced to give DNA, fingerprints, mugshot photos. Think about why they would do that to me. So after that, I had the interview. They brought in this woman to act as my responsible adult. And just for a moment, think about how that made me feel. That really made me incredibly angry for it to be inferred, for it to be suggested that I'm mentally ill. Imagine how angry. And what I did was I repeatedly said in this interview that I won't answer questions because I don't have legal representation and I haven't had the opportunity to sort it out. And I repeatedly said that I did not consent to this woman being in the room and her name being put on my records when they had no evidence that I was mentally ill or incapable. And I said to them at that point, just because someone says they don't understand legal charges, that cannot be used to infer they're mentally ill. I repeated those statements. They knew that was on the audio recording that would end up at court, so they terminated the interview. About half an hour later, they released me without charge at this point on bail. They presented bail papers in front of me, and I immediately said I'm not going to sign them, and I immediately said I do not understand the bail charges. At this point, again, they brought up the mental health issue card to play against me, and they said that they were going to try and get my husband, listen to this, they were going to try and get my husband to sign my bail papers. I don't know quite what happened. I think they'd called him. Again, they'd called him without my consent, not checking how I wanted to get home. He'd pulled up in the car park, and they had gone out in an unsolicited way, in an undocumented way, and told my husband, quote, "We think your wife is mentally ill." And they said that in front of my 13-year-old son and tried to get him to sign the bail papers. They wanted him to come into the station to sign the bail papers. And luckily, because he had our son with us, he declined, or I don't know, he didn't go into the station. So they released me anyway after not signing the bail papers. And they even said to me they were going to try and get my husband to do it, which I protested at. I said, he doesn't answer for me. I make my own decisions. And they tried to get this appropriate adult to explain my charges to me. And I said at that point, well, is this woman even a lawyer? Why am I going to talk to this woman? I'm not talking to this woman. They also told me on release that they'd be watching my house. And they claimed, which I strongly suspect is completely false, that my address had been released online and that I was, my family, not me, my family were at risk. And as you can imagine at this point, I become really angry and I said, how dare you suggest it's about my family's welfare and safety when during my previous arrest for being at protest, you released my name and address, my actual address, the road that I live in, to the Stroud News and Journal newspaper. They then claimed that I would be watched for my safety, and that they were letting me go. So they took me out to the car park. On the way out to the car park, the male officer tried to force bail papers onto my husband. And because I hadn't physically accepted the bail papers, there's something, isn't there, in taking the bail papers. And as I got into the car, I could see what they were trying to do, and I was absolutely furious. I jumped out of the car again. I put my hands up and said, "No, we're not taking those bail papers." And I said to my husband, "Do not take the bail papers." Shut the windows, and off we went. So a complete experience of psychological gaslighting, inappropriate procedures, assertions, defamation of character to suggest I'm mentally ill based on no evidence at all. So there we go. Absolutely horrific. And I think really this should tell people it doesn't matter what you think about the COVID situation. It doesn't matter what you think about the virus or any of that. What you have to seriously ask yourself is that if we have reached a point as a society where just for filming an empty hospital, a woman with no criminal record, who's no risk to the public, is subject to all of that, and that boundary has been crossed, where they will go into your home without the presentation of a warrant and force an arrest onto somebody. What does that tell you about where we are in this totalitarian system? And that's what it is. It's a totalitarian system. But, you know, just to finish this on a positive note, because my experience was awful. It was absolutely horrific. And I'm okay. A lot of people keep saying to me, "Are you okay, Debbie? Are you okay?" I'm absolutely fine. I've really become quite toughened up to all this year. And I know that this is what we have to face to change this. As people have done throughout history, we have to face all this stuff. But what I want to say is what has happened over the last week is absolutely amazing. Of course, there's been abuse, there's been articles that have said all sorts of horrific stuff about me. It comes with the territory of when you speak the truth and when you stand up. But what has happened is absolutely phenomenal, because what has happened is this week a national and even an international debate, because of my hospital coverage and because of the debate around it, has opened up. People are discussing, are the hospitals empty? Looking at the evidence of all the empty beds, and the evidence is out there from the NHS. A debate has opened up about tyranny, about the fact that we've overstepped this mark now when people are, you know, when the police are going into people's homes and they're arresting people for freedom of speech, basically. So I think by the response from the police has opened up this huge, the only way I can describe it is like a huge crack. It's opened up. And if you imagine a landslide, when you get a landslide, it's because the water's kind of seeping in, isn't it? And you get a big crack. Imagine like in the cliffs or something like that, you get a big crack that opens up. And as the water seeps in, the crack gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So if we imagine that the truth is like the water that's seeping into a crack, the crack expands, doesn't it? It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think what's happened because of what they've done to me this week is this huge crack has opened and the water's pouring in. And it's pouring in beyond their control, even though they're trying to control it. So through all this press coverage, the truth is pouring into the cracks and it's opening up. And it's going to be explosive. When the truth gets out there in a way that can't be controlled, it's explosive. And it's exciting. We have to use this moment now to just completely get it out there and continue. So to me, really positive that this has happened. And also what I would say is we should take heart because and feel positive and inspired from this, because I want to use the words of Gandhi. So Gandhi said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. So we're getting to that stage of the fight, aren't we? I don't think they're laughing so much anymore. In fact, they're not ignoring us anymore. They're fighting. It's getting nasty. When it gets to that, when you get to the fighting stage where it's coming out and everyone's talking about it, it's really, to me, quite positive that we've made that progress. We're getting somewhere. So keep going, guys. Please, please. You know, I'm fine. I'm not scared. I'm just bloody angry more than anything. And I've got this fire in me where I want to continue now. Keep going. We have to. We've got no choice. So please do not be scared off. This is all this is about is fear, fear, Operation Fear, Project Fear, to terrify you and to stop you acting. Don't let them do it. Don't let these psychopaths, don't let their minions in the police, don't let these people, and I don't say this about all the staff in the NHS because there's lots of amazing people, but don't let the people in the NHS that are being controlled scare you either. We have to do it for everybody. We have to keep up the fight. Let's make 2021, let's make this the year where we fight back, turn it around.